Okay. So we have Gordon Plunkett and Allan Jamieson and Tobias, like I mentioned. So if you could please come on up and we can get the panel started on the next steps. Thanks. Yeah. That's for you. Okay, so like I mentioned, we're just talking about the future now, and we've given the past, what's going on currently with Peter Parcelow's presentation, and now we'll talk a bit more about how we can modernize metadata for the future and for Canada and around the world. So Tobias, are we able to share your screen, or are you able to connect? I don't think we can see you here.
Yeah, I'm here. I actually have my video on right now.
Okay. Let's see if we can get you on the screen here. But we have a series of questions for the panelists today that we'll just go over.
And we've also set up a polling option. So if you want to get out your phones, there's a QR code and you can answer the questions yourself. That will be really useful for getting your ideas as well. And feel free, if you have questions, ask. Go ahead. And questions that we've created are sort of help us organize it, but if you have questions, please feel free to ask and answer along.
Perfect. Okay, so maybe I'll pass the floor to everyone on the panelists just to introduce themselves. So we'll get started from Allan, and then Tobias, you can do an introduction, and we'll head over to Gordon afterwards.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here to join this panel today. My name is Allan Jamieson from the UK. I've been involved in geospatial data for over 30 years. My heritage is in Earth observation, aerial survey, but I've been actively involved in standards with Ordnance survey for the past 5 years, which includes work with TC211 and OGC.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tobias Spears. I work for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans in Canada. I have been involved in the metadata space, well, since around 2003. I was actually involved in DFO's first geospatial metadata catalog implementation using GeoNetwork in 19115 2003. I was also part of the Federal Geospatial Platform Notional Architecture team with Biljana, and for the past probably 8 or 9 years, I have also been a member of the XML maintenance group under TC211.
Great, and Gordon?
Yeah, this is Gordon Plunkett. I'm from ESRI, Canada, and my history or background, I guess, is I was just telling Mr. Ryan this morning that one of my first job in the government was with PND at an information service, and they'd heard about these things called computers, and they wanted to start using it. So that was my job, to start computerizing some of their hard records and getting information out. And one of the things about the service was that it wasn't like public, it was like secret information. Everything was in there. The documents were all kept in a safe. So the online system had to be particularly safe. And then when I moved to CCRS remote sensing, I did a little bit of work on the cataloging there. So metadata has kind of been through my jobs around as I've been working. So it kind of very close interest in metadata and how it's used. And anyway, it's not my day job, but it's certainly something I'm very interested in.
Awesome, thank you for that. Then we'll just get started into the panel. And like Cassandra mentioned, it is an interactive panel, so feel free to connect online. If you are not connected to the Wi-Fi yet, it's the ISO TC211 Wi-Fi, and the password is Carlton 2026. And you can just scan the QR code, and we'll take your inputs as well and bring those up. So the first question for the panelists, what requirements do you foresee for metadata in the future, particularly as technologies like AI continue to evolve? So I'll open the floor to anyone, and then we can go and take your input. So Allan?
Yeah, sure. I think what we've seen today with the presentations is that metadata, it continues to evolve. I'm not really surprised that we consider different we go from XML to JSON encodings. But the thing that is on the horizon, well, is actually here now, is a much more, how would I put it, a much more concrete, specified use case for metadata. And that is making sure that our geospatial data is well represented within AI models, or to be used within AI models. And I think there's some quite interesting work going on in this area at the moment. I've talked to people who have said that metadata is still a bit of a side event, but I think it's actually front and central to be able to provide context of our geospatial data sets when interacting with AI models. What I'm seeing at the moment is that there is a rush to AI, and the AI has been implemented in lots of different ways. But for me, I think we should pause slightly, look at our data, and make sure that it's really well contextualized, and before we expose it to AI models, because then that would reduce the number of hallucinations. And I think there's a lot to do to make sure our data is contextualized, but metadata is certainly front and center part of that, to be able to describe our data sets fully. And it's really encouraging to hear the meetings earlier on this week, where we're talking about adding things like data quality outputs into our metadata, just as much as describing the bounding box of the area. So it's good to see these things being considered to provide that added context.
Yeah, Gordon, if you want to go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I've always got lots to say with metadata. In terms of the way I look at it, we have two things here. We have the content, who defines what's in the content, and then we have what I call the packaging. And I think Peter Barslow in his presentation made some good comments about that. The 19115 is the content, and there's a whole bunch of ways of how you format it and get it out. And as long as you have the mapping, you can get it out. And so with the 19139, of course, is the XML encoding of the 19115. But there's DCAT, there's HNAP, there's a million of these things. But from a user perspective, which is what I am now, we were working on some projects, and we're trying to find Canadian data. And because we search the internet, and there's a lot of good international catalogs, there's no Canadian data. And there's several one, then okay, well, that must be in Canada. It's at the federal level. You go to the federal level, you're going to search two catalogs. You do geo.ca and you do the open data portal. And they don't have the same information in the two of them. The open one uses what's the open source one name is there? The
Steward.
It's Scheme Doctor something. Anyway, they use a slightly different search mechanism. And then there's the geo.ca, which says a lot. But I think in terms of the data, there needs to be a crosswalk between whatever's there and the 19115, because that's pretty well common. And you know that but at least with Canada, at the federal level, a lot of people in the provinces and users are using JR 19115. So it's only the federal government where this is an issue. But the problem is that you guys define what's going on out in the community. And so when I saw the list of the new standards and still had a 20-year-old standard on it, oh my God. We need to, and I was kind of talking to myself, and Juliana said she was working on the HNAP work group. I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if the result of that HNAP work group is that we're going to get rid of HNAP? The harmonization part is perfect. I thought that was really well done. It's the map part that's the problem. It's time. And just one other point I'd like to make is that we worked on a project last year on wildfires. And we had this process of taking on wildfires. It's a really busy thing when the fire starts and then it's so incident. And there's lots of inputs, and so we had this workflow process where you get the data in, then convert it into what we call analysis ready data, and then you do some AI or analytical processes on it, and you send it to the incident manager, incident team manager, and right, ITM, and he would make decisions on that. But the only way to keep track of what the data was and what he was making decisions on, because after the fire, they look at, okay, what data was available? What did you have when you made that decision? And some of those decisions are like that. So you had to have a good record of all of that. So we thought, well, what better way to do it than metadata? So we started looking at the metadata. So it's becoming more and more important to us. Definitely future use, like to go from the input to the output. You're talking about minutes. You're not talking about hours or days. But you can't be making a decision on some raw data. If there's an analysis done, you start making a decision on that. So that's another one in addition to the AI model that's for using metadata for workflows. So stop there.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Tobias, and I know you want to talk as well, so go ahead, please.
Yeah, that's great. I'll start with AI specifically. So, I mean, we're already being challenged to report on where we are using AI, and trust in AI is still, let's say, we're not there yet. So, the result from your models is going to be about as good as the data going in. So the expectations for just content requirements, what information we're going to produce and provide in our metadata context is going to increase. I think we're already seeing, we need to consider how we're going to describe our AI models themselves. There's already work being done. I've seen the working group communications on standards for metadata for AI model training data sets. I expect that if it hasn't already been started, there'll be some focus on metadata for the models themselves. Because we're now, we continue to push the envelope of machine actionability. I expect the demand are going to be progressed beyond just basic contextual and descriptive metadata to a level of specificity to allow machines to discover, assess, and then actually action our models. So I think it's great. You see some of that work already in place with like the OGC standards and even the historical web services, but those standards tend to be quite complex for the uninitiated. So it'll be interesting to see where we head in the future. I would say on the producer side, integrating AI into metadata production is, I think, going to be a no-brainer. We have a lot of work happening now. There are a lot of commercial technologies that are now interrogating and extracting technical metadata of other assets, and are getting us to a certain level. But now we need to look at, well, can we automate or semi-automate the contextual metadata? And this is where we need to take the content and then the human intelligence, whether it's publications and other resources, and bring those together. And when we get to the point where we have, models that are starting to produce metadata content for us, how far do we go in terms of human in the loop for inspecting and verifying the content? How do we annotate, AI generated metadata in our records themselves? I think it's just going to continue to grow. I think it's a great opportunity. And then fundamentally, I mean, we're still working at 2003. I completely agree with Peter. We have a strong foundational standard on which to build our profiles. Then at least, we know what information we can collect. We can create very robust metadata records, whether it's a 2003 or 2014 version of ISO, and then reportray a lossy view of that metadata in DCAT to enable broader discoverability. I think that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Cassandra, are there any inputs online if you want to share?
Yeah, we received one, easy to access by AI, automated creation. Connection between metadata for geospatial and other forms of data. So that, I think, that aligns with a lot of what we heard. Yeah. Would you want to move on to the second question? Does anybody have any questions here? I would like to ask.
Okay, Tobias, particularly to you with respect to the backward compatibility. Can you hear me? I'm not hearing myself on this. so
Yeah, I
maybe
can hear you. I can hear you.
The backward compatibility issues relate also closely to the AI issues. When we first created the first metadata standard 2003, or it's actually for the 5 years before that, what we ended up with was a shopping list. It's a big shopping list of metadata elements that you can pick from. And then when we created the revision, we added to the shopping list a whole lot and made some changes supposed to be backward compatible, but it wasn't quite. And when we did NAP, and I know I did the negotiations with the US on NAP. NAP was a subset, a profile, where we could still allow people to extend, use all of the stuff from the shopping list, but no, here was the subset that was supposed to be commonly implemented. And then when we created HNAP, the thing was people were saying, I want the minimum. There's a minimum in the original ISO 19115, but it is far too minimal. So what HNAP really is a reasonable minimum. To say that it is 2003 is a little bit wrong, because in fact, it is a set of elements that were supposed to be backward compatible. And I think it's an issue. That's why I bring it up. What we should be doing is looking at the set of elements that are in HNAP and making sure we also know what their current version of 19115 standard and the new one developing. And I think you'll find it's probably 99% there. And if it isn't, well, you're going to end up with a little piece. Now, with respect to AI is got to be trained on certain things. I don't like the word AI. It's like back in the 1980s using the word computer. You know, it's just this fuzzy thing that means everything. What we're really talking here is not a large language model trying to work from something trained on the internet. What we're talking about is a neural network search engine that is trained on metadata. And it shouldn't hallucinate. If you do it that way, it should not hallucinate. And that's the next step, is how do you connect something like a reasonable subset like HNAP after we connect it to the updates, make sure it is truly backward compatible. And maybe we gotta drop the NAP part of it, because in fact, the Americans have dropped, so it's not a North American anymore. Profile is really become a Canadian, but whatever. So I would like you to comment on using AI properly on a solid base subset, which we can call HNAP if you want, but it's actually really a solid subset.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Doug. Yeah, Tobias, do you want to respond to that? And then we can move on to the next question.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about profiles and in the context of DFO. I completely agree. I mean, I think the work that we did on HNAP is a good, happy middle ground. When we started, we had no concept really on our side as to what a profile really meant for DFO outside of Canadian Hydrographic Service. So you know, we had a catalog, we had the entire standard placed in front of people. You know, going back to Billy Anna's presentation, at the time, we thought, well, the documentation is there, the entry tool is there, the discovery tool is there. I guess that's all we need to do. And we ended up with mixed results. And at the end of the day, we weren't even getting the minimum because people didn't know what the minimum was. I agree. If we have a tight minimal profile that is considered reasonable, that would, with the guidance and the tools to support it, to support the content creation, then I agree. I don't see why we could not have a model trained specifically tuned on that content. To me, I guess I would probably throw that maybe over to NRCan as part of the FGP Geo work. That's probably where I would land it. But I know, departmentally, our digital officer, our chief digital officer sector, I mean, HNAP is still the primary priority for DFO. Our departmental catalog is focused on HNAP. They are brokering the relay of metadata content up to FGP and open data. And, even internally, it was actually our team that developed the end user guidance and documentation and training to be able to start producing reliable, consistent records.
There's a comment from Liliana.
Hi, Liliana here again. You're explaining sort of the HNAP use at DFO. Tobias really prompted me to think of how I was using AI Copilot to help me prepare the presentation earlier. And Copilot was full of praise for Canada on its implementation of ISO 19115 North American profile and the use of HNAP. It's somehow known that we've, collaborated together, that we made it all happen, and that the HNAP is a pretty good, profile to use. So I don't know if it was hallucinating, but that's what I was getting from Copilot. So anyway, so it's just interesting. Sorry, I just had to share that.
I believe it. Cindy Mitchell, she was the NRCan lead on HNAP, and she was a real champion. They were heavily engaged with the US and other partners. I'm not surprised that you were able to actually get Copilot to find those publication releases online.
Copilot is still a large language model, and it's not
Yes.
what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's
No.
not what we're talking about. Training an AI on the HNAP data as a neural net rather than having nothing connected to the large language models that pull up all of the internet crap.
Yeah, it's fuzzy.
Awesome. Okay, just in the interest of time, I think we'll move on to our second question, which is, so that's building on some of the discussions we had on what steps can organizations take to future-proof their metadata practices in anticipation of unknown technological advancements, such as AI and those sorts as well. So I'll open up the floors to the panelists, whoever wants to go first.
I think I can only really talk for ourselves at Open Survey in the UK, but we use metadata extensively across our organisation in cataloguing our data. We actually operate a federated catalogue system because we deal with so many different data types from aerial imagery, vector data, and numerous other types that we work with. And increasingly, we're moving to using different types of data. So I think the best thing that you can do is have that expertise in your organisation to be able to track your data using metadata. And I think Peter sort of set out really, you've got your 115, which describes your content, and then you can flow your output from that. And the other thing that we also do at Open Survey is to have the externals in mind when putting our metadata together. So we have catalogs that expose our product metadata to other catalogs, so it can be accessed within UK government, within anybody can access. We've got several external catalogs that access our product metadata, so that it gets exposed. And I do see that requirement to expose our metadata externally for our products will continue to increase as people become more interested in what we're doing and using geospatial data for complex analytics.
Thank you. Tobias, or I think every Karen go first, and then Gordon will get to you. Okay.
I guess my first piece of advice is organizations need to pay attention to what's going on around them. I point to NRCan because I know your department is heavily invested in keeping its fingers in all of the standards body pies, and I think that's really critical. I mean, we have IHO, OGC, ISO, OASIS, and others, and the metadata space is not ISO alone. So we need to look at what's happening in the partner standards bodies. We need to think about keeping TAP. We need to, as a government, I think we need to really look at what our strategy is going to be to evolve our metadata standards and practices going forward. Glad to hear that you're thinking about it. There are some organizations, I think, that just have a simple data catalog, so not integrated into really any business processes. So a migration can be a one and done. But there's no doubt there are a lot of organizations that have metadata fully integrated into their business. So they're not moving anytime soon. So going back to Doug's point about backwards compatibility, we need to continue maintaining what we have while we start to build a path for the future. At some point, we need to stem the tide. We have to decide, okay, we're going to start, creating new metadata content based on the new standard, and slowly migrate away from the old and deal with the business processes as part of that process. And it's not going to be easy. Definitely, I could say, for goodness sakes, do not start from scratch. Because no matter if you decide that metadata is easy and a data inventory is easy, great. But once you start dealing with users and dealing with interoperability and broader metadata exchange, then every custom pipe that you build, you're going to have to build some form of interface for people to talk to you. So, look at standards like those from ISO, pick a strong foundation, establish a profile that's reasonable for your organization and its level of maturity, and then ensure that you have the tools and the supports and the educational and best practices for people to actually start using it. I think that's all I have.
Thanks. We'll move on to Gordon.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement that, you just need to pick a target and go for it. I mean, it's not, but maintain your OSER systems and I like Allan's, federated approach too. That's another way of handling it, so you can keep the data in whatever format in its existing system and just pull it into another one that allows you to have have access to all of that information and in a format that folks can use in modern systems. And I understand that it's a big jump if it's baked right into existing systems, legacy systems, and those are very hard to change. But it's not necessarily the format of the data that's an issue, because you can convert them. I mean, Doug mentioned they're probably 98%. I haven't looked at it, but they're probably pretty close to being the same, and just make crosswalks to all of these things, and then you can have CCAN is one I was thinking of for the open government portal. That format, Peter Parslow probably has the whole catalog of all those formats. There's lots of those, so just pick some and the important ones. But I would also say that the problem is in the federal government. I think most people outside the federal government, even at the provincial level, are using full ISO rather than profile. And for them, presumably it'd be easier, but I think for the user, and with all the federal data, there's a lot of investment in the federal government data. And people, you know, the effing fair, you know, people can't find it. So, that's the big problem. And, you know, you have to go specifically into the federal catalog. That's the only place it is, and then you find it, and then you got the issue of, well, it's in this format, it's that data model and this data model, that's a whole nother kettle of fish that that the users have to deal with as well. So it's not an easy problem, but I think the issue is how you keep whatever you're building on fluid enough or modular enough or adaptable enough because a new format comes out in a year or two to support AI. I doubt it, but let's say it's just straight HTML, then you can still just convert from whatever you have. It's the content that's important, not necessarily the envelope that you put it in.
And I think that perfectly leads up to our next question, which that if we do update these metadata and we utilize new ones, what are some of the benefits and risks that are associated with updating those metadata standards, right? And we have new metadata standards. So Gordon, you mentioned it's mainly about the content rather than the standard itself. So if you have some comments on that, I'll take that. So Allan?
As Peter mentioned, the DCAT thing has been coming off and taken off in Europe a bit. And it's something that we have looked at Urban Survey. And because we've always been a TC 211 house and always will be, I think. But we were sort of piqued our interest when the DCAT thing came along. And the one thing that really struck me about DCAT was that they have a layer of metadata that is suitable for more business type applications. So when we were thinking about our use of metadata within Ordnance Survey, we wanted to lift it out of the geospatial community within Ordnance Survey. We wanted to take it so that our senior managers, our data consumers, our customers could understand some of the business elements. So our internal data metadata standard that we've added some DCAT elements to it. So it does mean that finance, for example, could get information on these from a business point of view, not necessarily the boundary box and the details of the data itself. And that way is where we do see benefit in democratizing our metadata a lot more. And we're also using it to help us monitor things like PII, so personal information, whether the data set contains that as well, which is a data governance issue. We need to know what data sets contain personal information and treat them accordingly. And I suppose the third aspect really is that we are starting to work a lot more with third-party data coming into the business, and that we're enhancing with our geospatial base for improved data analytics. And again, we need to know which data sets that we hold are third-party, but not just that. We need to know the contract that we have with that third party, whether we can use the data for research, whether we can use it for individual products, etc. So I suppose the biggest benefit really is for us anyway, is extending that geospatial metadata standard to incorporate more data governance elements, which I think will really benefit us in the long term, because we do have ambitions to work with more third-party data. Thank you.
Tobias or Gordon, do you have any?
Tobias, go, please.
Tobias, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, from our perspective, we are continuing to extend our departmental data catalog. our chief digital officer sector has integrated information classification into the catalog so that there will be more granular control over when assets will be accessible and discoverable. I think just our whole thinking on content, metadata content that's required, and especially metadata content in response to new needs. Just thinking the difference between the contextual metadata and the technical and machine actionable metadata. These things continue to evolve. Frameworks for publishing and sharing ontologies and other standardized reference data continue to evolve. I think keeping on top of the evolving standards is really important to make it easier in the future. The biggest risk is that the more heavily baked the standard is into existing processes, the more likelihood that the change is going to require some change. And that's difficult because we don't always know how units are actually using the catalog. I think what's great is that the work that we've done to get to an HNAP profile. We have a minimal departmental profile as well, more generic and not specific to geospatial. If we're looking to easily convert metadata, I think we have many options now to move metadata between content standards. It's not like it was 20 years ago, and I think that it'll continue to be easier to automate and semi-automate that process. But yeah, I mean, I just think when I started with DFO, the standard was, okay, we're going to do ISO 19115 or Dublin Core or a mix of the two. That's where we started. And then you fast forward and you look at where we are now. ISO, OGC records, DCAT, and schema.org. I think there's just so many to choose from now. I don't think there's an excuse now for not having a metadata standard and a framework that can support the organization, but it just requires investment, I think.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. There's lots and lots and lots of benefits, I think, and I think the thing is to be compatible with the newer ones. The risks, I think, are the bigger issue. I don't think there's any serious technology risk other than picking which format to use. Most systems can start to handle them. There is I want to call it a financial risk, that there is a cost to this. I think, if the members of the panel just, mentioned that. And then there's the people risk, and I think we've talked about that. Maybe Cassandra's going to fix this, but you need, smart people in metadata. Like right now, like to write about this, it's hard to get the people to work in metadata. These people are, so it's there is a people risk too. I think that's and Tobias loves it. So there are people around that can handle metadata. I think it's just a matter of making it a little jazzier, but I think tons of benefits and a few risks.
Great. I think in the interest of time, this will be our last question, but I know there were many risks raised in terms of backward compatibility with Doug and Tobias. You've raised those as well, but like Gordon mentioned, there are many benefits as well. So if we can work towards that and work on those risks as well and mitigate them, I think it's in the end it's more beneficial than that. So okay, so are there any closing remarks from any of the panelists in terms of any future modernizing metadata, any suggestions that you would have in terms of how to proceed for metadata?
Just make it planning on it.
That's it, yes.
It's easy to say.
I think the one comment that I probably want to leave you with is it's already been talked about people risk and metadata being perceived as being a dead end compared to other areas of geospatial. if your data sets, as a result, your metadata sets as a result become maybe slightly out of date, maybe not looked after in the way that you would look after other geospatial data aspects. Maybe metadata isn't read by people within your business, so don't see it as that important. One area that I'm going to see is important, and that is any AI that you expose that data to. They will read every field, right? And they will interpret as they see fit, right? Without question. So I suppose the other risk in this way is that it's incumbent on ourselves to make sure that those metadata are maintained, looked after to a much higher degree, well, just as high a degree as any other geospatial data set. Otherwise, there are risks down the line if that data gets exposed to it. So I see increasing importance of metadata. Maybe we could be here next year talking about the same thing. Thank you.
Tobias, are there any closing remarks
Sure.
from yourself?
I mean, I agree that modernizing metadata is not a technology issue. I think it really it's a people and focus issue. It's great to have the update on where Canada is going. Looking forward to seeing where we go from HNAP and ISO 2003. Definitely, Allan, interested in participating in that work. I think at the end of the day, I think there's going to be, I think there will be more opportunities to help, data stewards, catalog their assets more easily, as we continue to have AI and other tools to help provide summaries and reduce some of the busy work. I do think we need to continue to be respectful of where the data community is in terms of their metadata literacy. We've run 2 departmental data literacy surveys. The second one we ran last year, and for the second time in a row, metadata is the domain where everyone self-assesses themselves as low maturity. So I think we just need to be there to guide, and it's not just about the tools. And I do think that we need to provide some guidance to our IT practitioners so that we have metadata profiles that are exposed to data stewards by default to a reasonable level of detail that they're useful. Because using the sledgehammer approach and trying to get stewards with no education to populate everything in a standard like ISO 19115 is not going to go anywhere. With some of the lighter weight standards, they are lossy. So trying to bring users to a happy medium and then deal with the relay of metadata content to the lossy standards as a downstream view, I think is a way to go. And I think there is a great opportunity for technology to help. And definitely looking forward to seeing where the government of Canada is headed in terms of its geodata cataloging.
Great, thank you very much, Tobias, Gordon, and Allan. So there's similar comments online and talking about having business value for metadata modernization and having that available for business cases across governance, training, and to enable collaboration as well, right? So I think that's the main theme in planning it out and going through with it. So yeah, okay. So I think there's refreshments that are waiting in Ottawa. So once again, we would like to thank our panelists today, Allan, Jamieson, Tobias Spears, and Gordon Plunkett. So we can all give them a hand of applause. And